Okay, we have started the production. And I hope as a result of listening to your wonderful colleague, Liz Coapola, that you started moving a little bit and started dancing. And so we are, oh goodness, very blessed to now have as our next performer, as it were, Dr. Cynthia Croom. She's going to give us the whole family approach, the musical. So she's going to strike a lot of chords and keys and engage in a lot of moves to give us some additional insight into what's going on at her agency in Nashville, Tennessee, Metro Action Commission. Yeah, Metropolitan Action Commission. I should know how to say that. I don't know how that's set up, but they also go by MAC, and she is the executive director and just a leader in every in every way, from her efforts with the whole family approach to some important efforts that the agency has done in workforce development, equity, all the things. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Cynthia Croon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. I hope you all are able to hear me. When I was working on this presentation, I felt like I should have a musical that went along with this. And so I was thinking about musicals, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do The Wiz and we'll just, but I couldn't make the connection. So I just said, forget it. I just do the presentation as you've asked me to do it and to go forward. So Tiffany has mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Metropolitan Action Commission here in Nashville, Tennessee. I should tell you that we are a public CAP. So we are a part of city government in Nashville, and I'm going to do my best to walk you through our process. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. We've been doing 2-gen whole family work for, I would say, the entire time I've been here. We just didn't know that's what it was called. And so when we figured out what it was called, we decided we should formalize the process in a different way. And my hope really is to be able to walk you through that. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've done as a part of our work, and I hope that this can be shared with you all later, is we've actually done a research project on our whole family initiative. That's really what we call the good, bad, and the ugly. And I should say to you, just for the purposes of background, that we do our 2-gen whole family work directly connected with our Head Start and Early Head Start. So if you're not in Head Start or Early Head Start as a parent, you don't actually participate in our 2-gen work. That's where that sort of started. And so whether it's working with the children in Head Start, Early Head Start, or our youth initiative, the starting point really is you must be a parent in the Head Start program for 2-gen. You can go to the next slide and I'll walk you through it. So our journey has been a journey. I've been the executive director here for now 20 years. And so you will notice when it talks about our journey from 2000 to 2014, that's 14 years. We were doing a lot just trying to get the agency to become a functioning agency. So I want to say that to you right off, that this wasn't, your agency may be in a better place when you start, but we were in a situation where I was brought into the agency because of some major problems with the finances in the agency, with not meeting federal regulations. And so for 14 years, we were literally trying to rebuild an organization so that it would be the kind of organization that we felt was positioned to do the work that we're doing today. So you'll notice we talk about tearing down organizational silos, or they were eliminated during that time frame. We had to move to an emphasis on being one agency. We shift from to being mission and results centered, and I'll explain what all of this means. And then we changed how we used our community services block grant dollars in the agency. So just to make sure you have a clear understanding, when I got here, Head Start was king. And so anything that happened, they literally worked in programs. Head Start sort of ran I guess the trajectory of the organization. Everything was focused there. There was no working cross programmatically. Head Start at times would get a raise. Nobody else in the agency would get one. It was an agency that was highly focused on a program-driven approach. And whoever was perceived to have more power is how the agency functioned. There was no cross planning. There was no shared planning. None of that was going on. And so the beginning part for us was, we're going to be one agency. There's not going to be separate rules for one group versus another one. We understand that the funder has rules, but the organization was not going to function as if it was driven by funder rules. Hence the emphasis on mission. So we made the decision that programs had to fit the mission. If they did not fit the mission, they would be taken out of the program or out of the agency. So I wanted to make sure I'm clear. Quite a lot of organizational work was done for us to begin this process. Then, as I said, we changed how we used our CSBG funding from a focus on just emergency one-time help to really looking at how we could do long-term work to address the concerns that we had about poverty using community services block grant funding. So now that moves us to from 2015 to present. So we went through a whole process of changing our vision statement to focus back on breaking the cycle of poverty. Again, de-emphasizing the high emphasis on emergency assistance. So emergency assistance literally became a road or pathway to us being able to get folks who were coming for emergency assistance enrolled in Head Start, enrolled in GED. And while we value our ability to provide emergency assistance, it's a critical part of what we do. We did not want it to be simply all that we were known for. So we went through that process to make sure that we shifted to that whole, so our whole focus shifted to, we got to be mission focused. And then we need to not just be the folks who are reading about evidence-based practice. We want to be the ones who are creating evidence-based practice. So that meant a whole shift in our organization. So how did we do that? If you look at 2016, we adopted the human services value curve. If you say the human services value curve around my team here, and some of them will meet it with great excitement and joy, and others will say to you, please do not use that term to me today, because we were living, eating, breathing. And if you know the human services value curve, it's literally a framework for how you make sure an organization is functioning in the way that it should. And it begins with, making sure that you're not spending all of your time allowing yourself to be run by funder requirements, meaning all of your energy isn't spent on regulations versus having a vision yourself for making sure that your families are moving out of poverty and being able to shift the whole organization in that direction, so that you're working with families cross-programmatically to achieve the goal of economic expansion and security. We expanded our focus on data, and you'll see me talk a little bit about that later, that our emphasis on data was agency-wide. So we were no longer just looking at data in terms of programs. We started to look at data in terms of, can we show a relationship between what happens with the children in Head Start when their parents are engaged in workforce. So you will notice in 2016, we did our first correlational study of Head Start children and their parents. And what we wanted to see is, if parents are engaged in workforce, if they're engaged in some kind of training, is there an actual difference in how those children, their children, perform in Head Start? And if you have a chance to go to our website, Tiffany, if we can make that information available or that link available to folks, then you can see the actual study that looks at the relationship. And it was certainly a positive relationship between the outcomes for children and the outcomes for their parents when we were doing this, moving toward a 2-generational lens. In 2018, we were accepted into the Community Action Academy as part of the Whole Family Community of Practice cohort, in part, I believe, because of the work that we had already been doing related to 2-gen work. But the advantage of still participating in the whole family, the community of practice, was it allowed us to formalize our theory of change. So we were doing the work, we were doing the research, but we had no formalized theory of change. And then I want to just share with you, in 2018, we, based on a survey that we did of our team members within the agency, we redesigned our entire human resources department to respond to with a greater emphasis on our team member needs. What does that mean? We are an organization who is in a constant state of change. And if you've studied change, what you know is that it makes people feel insecure. It creates areas of frustration because people can never really feel like things are settled. And so one of the things that came out of the survey that we did, or that we do annually with our team members, was that their voice wasn't being heard. And as a result of that, we moved to a model in our human resources division where we actually eliminated the human resources director position. And we chose instead to have what we call business partners. And those business partners are assigned to a group of people, meaning they have to actually go to the locations where the team members are. They have to spend a certain amount of time working in those units with those team members so that they have an understanding, both when they're recruiting and when they're advising, of what team members actually deal with in whatever unit it is that they work in. So they've been background checked in the same way that a Head Start teacher has been background checked, so that they are able to go into all of our environments and have a different approach in terms of how they engage with our staff. 2019, we completed our 2-gen whole family evaluation report. Now, this was the evaluation of the 2-gen projects that we do. One of them being CompTIA A+ certification, where parents who go through, who are enrolled in whose children are enrolled in Head Start, go through an entry-level IT certification. The goal of our 2-gen work is that they should begin at least $19 an hour. I don't know what that is in your area. In our area, a $19 an hour starting salary is a pretty decent salary for them. It had to be a short-term training with high yield. So that study was produced in 2019. It's that same year, we also produced what's called the Head Start Impact Study, where we looked at what was happening with children in Head Start and compared that to how children were doing nationally. But this study was funded using community services block grant funding. So that's what I want to make sure that I emphasize to you, that nothing is done in isolation. So when we did our 2-gen whole family evaluation report, it's the workforce division, the Head Start unit, or what was the Head Start unit. It's the data division, all of those teams coming together. Then in 2019, we were also selected as a Kresge Next Gen organization, which meant that our organization received funding from the Kresge Foundation to serve as a national model of organizations who are doing 2-gen work. And then in that same year, we produced our 2-gen whole family report, which I think I mentioned earlier, also happened in 2019. In 2020, as if there wasn't enough that our team has been through, we literally restructured, sorry, somebody's calling me. We really restructured the entire organization. So what does that mean? This is the second restructuring that we have done. In 2015, we restructured the organization, meaning that we simply said, particularly when it came to our Head Start division, that we were going to use the fact that we were in recompetition. We were in recompetition because of our class scores. And so we said, okay, if we're going to have to recompete for our grant, then we may as well upend the whole thing. So in 2015, we did a restructuring of the Head Start unit. In 2020, we did a full restructuring of the entire organization. What does that mean? That means that as a result of our 2Gen work, the city of Nashville decided that they were going to take another department of Metro government, which was the workforce division, who had lost their WIOA funding, and they were going to move those functions, the youth function and all of the city's workforce, into our organization. So for us, that meant this is now the time for us to do, I don't know who wants to reach me today, for us to do some additional work to make sure our organization is positioned the way it should be positioned to continue forward with 2Gen. So what does that look like? It means that we got rid of all of our program names as divisions within our agency. So in other words, there is no longer a Head Start division in our agency. There's no longer a CSBG division in our agency. Anything that has a program name associated with it was changed. So now we have a Division of Early Education and Youth, which brings together all of those services that serve children and youth through age 24 based on the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act age grouping. We have a Community Services Division, and then Workforce was split from the Community Services Division and made a part of, made its own unit. At least 50 to 75 individuals either were shifted into positions that were better suited for their skill set. We met with them and explained to them that the agency was restructuring and that our goal was to keep them employed. However, we believe that they would be better suited in other units. We worked with them and we transferred them into areas that we felt better fit their skill set. I cannot tell you how important it is to be flexible in your ability to recognize that you sometimes have people who've been with you for a long time, but who do not have the skill set for the new normal. However, because you want to be able to use their gifts within the organization, we were fortunate in that we were able to shift them into roles that were better roles for them. For some people, that was advancement. For other people, it was not. I want to make sure I also mention to you that during this time, as a result of the overall work we were doing, we saw an overall increase in our agency budget. Our agency budget went from about 30 million. We are now at about 40 million. We're actually at 45, but I don't want to count that because a lot of that is CARES money. As a result of this work, people started coming to us, wanting to give us money. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but when you do this, you don't have to do as much seeking out. Even though we had to apply for dollars, people were coming to us, asking us to apply for dollars because of the research work that we had done, and were able to demonstrate our ability to use not just, again, be the folks who talked about this is what best practice looked like, but we wanted to be the agency that was creating best practice in our field. And then I want to mention two other things. I know my time is almost out. We hired a transformation and innovation director as a part of our total restructure. Our data team moved from 2 individuals to 5, which again would not have been possible without additional funding. We gained an entire youth division, and we expanded our workforce division. That has all happened in 2020. So I guess the message that I want to give to you is, first of all, this is a process. If you'll go to the next slide, and I am really not doing well on time. Go to the next slide. These are some of the things that our agency learned. That as agency leadership, you have to be willing to lead this process in your agency. by first resourcing it yourself. You got to understand what you're doing. You have to assess your agency's readiness. If your people already don't talk to each other and you're trying to do this without addressing the silos or the things that you have going on in your organization, it's going to be really hard. Be prepared to make tough choices. And that means moving people who have been in long-term positions out of those positions. You might be sued. I've been sued 3 times. Fortunately, I prevailed, but people don't like change, and they certainly don't like change that affects their pay. Expect to train, and retrain your staff. Find experts and others who can work with your team. My time is up, sorry. Voice is crucial, and that means your customers, your feedback from your team, your stakeholders. You got to talk to people and you have to listen to what they're telling you so that you can make adjustments. Start small, start with a small pilot, 2 people, 5 families. You don't have to start with a large group of people. You must stick with this and not assume it's going to take care of itself. It won't. We are constantly retraining. We're constantly in the mode of having to make sure our team understands the direction we're going and our board. If you're not the agency leader, ask yourself what you can do from your position. You don't have to be the agency leader. It's best if it's the agency leader, but there is a way that you can actually start even if you're not. When people, organizations, groups see your success, they want to fund you. And then finally, your customers are your greatest beneficiaries of this approach. I know that was quick. I hope that helps. I will do my best to answer any questions that you might have if I'm allowed to take questions.